Hello everyone and welcome back to your monthly dose of brand new book releases. Today, as always, we are focusing on fantasy, sci-fi, and horror books that are coming out in the month of March. I think I've curated a really exciting list here. I hope you find something that sounds exciting and worth picking up, and if you do, liking this video and sharing it with a friend always helps me out. Alright, let's go ahead and dive in and start on March 1st, which only has one book here on my list, and that is The Bride of Death. This is an adult debut that blends fantasy, historical fiction, and romance, which makes sense because it's a Hades and Persephone retelling with a twist of fairy tale and folklore, but some early reviews have mentioned, for those of us who like, high fantasy, should check this one out. We see our main character through her childhood of being death touched and becoming a woman, and the fate of her village falls on her, defeating some type of darkness. I can already tell it's going to be one of those stories that's probably a really lyrical prowls and maybe even some dark gothic vibes as well, especially with a cover like that. March 5th has a few books coming out. The first one is The Poisons We Drink, which is yet another debut. It's a fantasy that is steeped in all the practical magic goodness within a society of witches and humans in a contemporary setting. It's about Venus Stoneheart, who is a brewer of love potions, and this brings in most of her family's income. But after some tragic events, she finds herself falling into the dark underbelly of her society. Come to find out, there's a lot of friction between witches and humans, and Venus has to make some very difficult decisions. I feel like witchy reads are the one type of book that you can read all year round, so definitely put this on your TBR. Sona and the Golden Beast. This is a stunning middle grade fantasy that is labeled as a little on the darker side. At least that's what some fellow reviewers have been saying, and my adult fantasy heart is very pleased to hear this. We have Sona, a young girl who is on a quest to find a magical item that will help bring someone she loves back to life. So a much more intense read it sounds. There are magical animals, a grand adventure, an epic quest apparently. Plus the magic system is tied to gems in nature, and there's a cruel king that suppresses this magic. Honestly, this is the kind of middle grade that I sought after, and I can tend to love middle grade like this. And then I have Murder Road, so we're changing things up here, as this is an adult thriller. It's a pretty hyped up one, as hundreds of reviewers have already read it. It revolves around this one particular road that is basically cursed and everyone steers clear of, as it's one that several murders have occurred over the years yet remain unsolved to this day. But of course, we follow a newlywed couple driving overnight to their honeymoon getaway, and they run into a hitchhiker, not literally run him over. They stumble across a hitchhiker and they pick her up and she's bleeding. I don't want to say anything more than that. It's a thriller, so I always like to go into them as blind as possible, but it sounds really interesting. That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human. This is book 3 in the Mead Mishap series that Orbit Books is republishing, and I've talked about the series quite a few times already because book 1 republished in January. I read it, and then book 2 in February, and now finally it's book 3's turn. This is a monster romance, quite a steamy one, but it's actually really funny. It's dubbed a rom-com, and I can attest to that personally. There's magic, adventure, lots of banter between our characters, so if you are excited to see how the series ends, you're not going to have to wait long for its conclusion. The Hidden Queen. This is book 2 in the Nightfall saga, book 1 being The Desert Prince. Maybe you'll recognize the cover. This continues that story, alternating first-person narration from Olive and Darren. The two protagonists plunge deeper into their battle to fight the demon enemy. I'm trying my best not to give away any spoilers here. I will say though that fans of the Demon Cycle series will be reintroduced to familiar characters, but you do not have to read that series to enjoy this one. So if this sounds interesting to you, don't be afraid to give it a try. The First State of Being. This is a story all about time travel, and I really like the cover, so I wanted to talk about it. Plus, it just sounds really interesting. It takes place in 1999, and we follow a kid named Michael living with his mother, and he is very concerned about Y2K. And he gets even more worried when he sees a strangely dressed kid sitting on a bench at his apartment complex. He soon discovers that this kid has actually traveled back in time because he loves everything about the 90s. Very strange, but I love the sound of it. I'm sure this is just filled with so much nostalgia as someone born in 1992. So it's like part past and futuristic sci-fi, I guess. Three Kinds of Lucky. This is a brand new urban fantasy series by an incredibly well-known author who writes a very long ongoing series, so it's really great to see a new start for her to bring in some new fans. This introduces us to Petra, who is a sweeper, which means she has this unique ability that allows her to see the I guess, like mystical mess left behind by mages who dabble in magic, even though she can't actually do magic herself. Well, she finds herself on a team of researchers who are trying to make sweepers not a thing anymore. That's obviously a problem. I really like how we get to see a whole new magic system from Kim Harrison. I know longtime fans have got to be excited about this one. On March 12th, we have the Hedge Witch of Foxhall. I know this title and thumbnail is scratching a certain cozy itch you have, because it sure is scratching mine. It's a fantasy that involves Welsh-like magic and a quest our characters go on. Magic is disappearing, even the dragons are all gone, but the king promises the crown to whichever son can destroy the dike and restore magic to Wales. And this forces the brothers into a sibling rivalry, and of course we have the Hedge Witch, who is, I guess, part of this power-hungry coven. And I'm sure in some way that these characters' threads cross and are hopefully able to save the world. It sounds really cute and feels very cottagecore, and the Welsh elements hopefully adds like a really rich history to the world. The Siege of Burning Grass. This is a novel all about war. It's supposed to be like a Cold War thriller meets fantastic fantasy. It features a disabled main character, a flying city that our main character has to infiltrate, and cohort with the enemy. It does sound really brutal and far too realistic, especially with what's happening today in the real world. It sounds like it's going to question what morals are right and wrong, and how to bring peace amidst all the chaos. Definitely want to look out for. Those Beyond the Wall, a brand new novel from the author who wrote The Space Between Worlds, which I actually talked about in a previous monthly book releases video. This one almost takes a murder mystery approach. So we have a character named Mr. Scales who was a runner in this place called Ashtown, and he learns that travelers are coming from parallel universes, but if those parallel universe travelers also exist in this plane, it murders the resident of this Ashtown to make space. Does this make sense? It sounds very weird. I really like the approach to like different planes of existence and how yourself can be a whole different being in another plane. Dude, too smart for my brain probably, but it sounds cool. A Feather So Black, a brand new first installment to a story about Fae with some Swan Lake vibes steeped in Celtic mythology. So here we have a protagonist who is a changeling who, I guess as a child, was exchanged for a princess, and she is now ultimately being used as a weapon for humankind against the Fae. Humans are desperate to get magic back. What's really cool is the main character possesses earth magic, which I feel like you don't see that often in fantasy. It's normally like fire or ice, but I hope this one will reel me back in to liking Fae stories. I don't even know if I've ever liked a Fae story. Anyways, up next I have Empire of the Damned. This is probably the most anticipated book on this list for many. It's a sequel to Empire of the Vampire. Not much of a title difference. It's part of J. Kristoff's newer grimdark epic vampire apocalypse series. It's a mash of everything, to be honest. It's like a fantasy Thanksgiving feast. This picks up directly after its predecessor and jumps right back into the action. I know many of you are counting down the minutes until the clock strikes midnight of March 12th, so I'll leave this one here. Sunbringer. This is the sequel to Godkiller, a very diverse fantasy that came out last year that is full of adventure as it kind of gets compared to The Lord of the Rings in terms of like the characters going on a long journey. Clearly it's a sequel, so I can't really talk too much about it here, but if you enjoy the first book, you don't have to wait long to continue the story that seems like a lot of people loved. Okay, finally moving on to March 19th, we have The Woods All Black. This one is being described as a historical horror with trans romance and blood-soaked revenge. How cool is that? So we're actually following a main character who is a nurse being assigned to a small town, and of course the local pasture and its people are not being so kind, and she notices some violent actions that are occurring toward someone else in the village or in the town. Fair warning, this is pretty dark and grotesque, which makes total sense. Already this book says a lot, and I hope it gets the attention it deserves. Where Sleeping Girls Lie, a new YA contemporary mystery hitting shelves next month about a young girl who, after losing her father, enrolls into a boarding school after being homeschooled all of her life, but suddenly a roommate disappears and sinister secrets emerge soon after. This book sounds like it's tackling a lot of serious issues under its like more simple plot, marking it to be way more in depth than it appears. I know a lot of you like your thrillers, so here's another one to jump on soon. The author who debuted with her previous book, Sister Song, has a new book coming out called Song of the Huntress. I love how the covers to both of these books kind of match. So this is a feminist reimagining of the legend of the Wild Hunt. So obviously it mixes fantasy with historical, following multiple characters who are all very different. This is a standalone, so we have a story that wraps up nicely. So if you want a mythology to read in the month of March, pick this one up or add it to your wish list. On March 26th, we have Diavola. I'm personally so excited about this one. It's definitely one that I'm going to be trying out. It's a horror novella all about this family who are going to stay in Italy for vacation, but upon arriving at their villa, things go awry in a very paranormal sort of way. There's even this great windowless tower that they are forbidden to enter but hear scratches from within. It sounds so creepy and right up my alley. I love this cover. It gives me goosebumps every time I look at it. I just hope it's a really good ghost story, like intertwined with like twisted family dynamics. How to Solve Your Own Murder, another cover that I really like. There's something oddly cute and old school about it, though this is clearly a murder mystery novel, but apparently more on the cozy side. I think it sounds so interesting. So the book alternates between a character named Frances in 1965, where she receives a fortune that she will be murdered. And then we have Annie's POV in the present, where she has to solve the murder of her great aunt Frances. Like, such a really fun way to tell a story and interconnecting POVs. This is labeled as #1 in a series, so there might be more to this releasing later. Okay, and last and certainly not least, I have The Emperor and the Endless Palace. Man, what an eye-catching cover. My goodness, this is a debut told from, I guess, 3 different lifetimes. Not POVs, lifetimes. So already it sounds very complex. The first one is an emperor and a lowly clerk. The second one is an innkeeper and a fox spirit. And the third lifetime that we're following is an artist and his muse. It also takes us to an East Asian setting. Quite intricate and complex sounding, and definitely a book that's going to, like, get your brain working, but it sounds really cool. It is smutty apparently, which makes me think it's adult, maybe new adult. I'm not entirely sure, but I am smitten over this colorful cover nonetheless. Alright everyone, so that is it for this list of books releasing in March 2024. Let me know down below of any that I missed that you're excited about. Like this video if you found something new that you didn't hear about before. Subscribe if you're not. I'd love to have you here, and until we meet again, happy reading.